Welcome to the Mischief. I'm Valen, and this is Create, v.3e. Today I'm going to be teaching you the basics, everything that you need to know in order to get going in Create, as well as a few advanced tips on how you can even make your own slime, plus even ore doubling. To start with, I should let you know that there's a very simple way of actually finding out information about any of this mod, and that is by hovering over the item with your mouse and pressing either Shift or Control to get different kinds of information about how these things can be used. Where to begin? World Gen, Gabbro, Dolomite, Limestone, Weathered Limestone, and Natural Scoria. All these things you'll find throughout the world, as well as a couple of ores, zinc and copper ore, which if it's exposed to the air will turn green like this over time, otherwise it will be a very orangish color like so. If you are finding scoria in the world and you mine it, it will turn into just scoria, so you'll have to have a silk touch enchantment on your tools in order to get this really pretty rainbow effect. Next, we're going to go into your first and most important alloy that you will probably find, and that is andesite alloy. Actually, you'll probably have to make it. It's made from either iron or zinc nuggets combined with some andesite for your base crafting recipe. There are ways of making this cheaper later on, but to start, that's going to be your entrance. Next up, we've got cogs. We've got small cog wheels and large cog wheels. They're both relatively inexpensive, and you get a bunch of them for each of the recipes, and they can be placed in the world vertically or horizontally. Once you combine them with something like a hand crank in this case, which is also made rather simply with a shaft, some andesite alloy. Shafts are just made from some more andesite alloy. As you can see, it is quickly becoming a very important ingredient already, but once you place a hand crank on one of the cogwheels, you can therefore start making things go faster or slower depending upon how you've stepped things up. Now in this example, I currently am showing you that standard you'll generate 256 stress units. This is how a lot of the power is generated and measured in this mod. Therefore, starting off with, we make 32 rotations per minute while just holding down right click with this hand crank. As you can see on the left though, it's saying 256 for that other version that is spinning really fast up top. By alternating small and large cogwheels and then connecting them as such as they go up to a certain point until they reach the maximum, therefore, you can increase the speed that you can have this work. And this works in lots of different mechanics, and there are shortcuts that you can use, but this is just one way of many that you can actually increase the speed of whatever contraptions you make. Here we've got gearboxes. They come in two different forms, whether it be vertical or horizontal, allowing you to actually make right angles with your different contraptions. So if I spin this, you can see that both of these gear shafts are currently spinning, and they are going into and out of a gearbox. Simple way of making them is just some cogwheels, a little bit of andesite casing, which is just a little bit more andesite and wood, and you can actually craft them in a crafting grid to convert them into the alternate version and back again. Now one way of actually reversing the direction that a shaft spins is by just putting down an extra gearbox, whether it be vertical or horizontal, and spinning it as such. One on the left is spinning in one direction, while the one on the right is spinning in another. Now if you wanted to actually have that a bit simpler so that you can reverse it at a whim, you can put something like a gear shift in place, which is andesite casing, some redstone wire, and cogwheels placed down, and in this case there's no redstone signal being given. You can see that that cogwheel will spin with the handle. If I switch this, it goes in the opposite direction. Next we have the encased chain drive. Now with this, it's a little bit more expensive with iron nuggets and some shafts, but you do get two of them in a crafting recipe. You place them down and they will actually connect as you see here, thus allowing you to actually have two shafts spinning simultaneously right next to each other as before, but if I sneak or let go, I can reverse the direction that I am currently spinning with a regular hand crank, but you can also use a wrench, which I can show you how to make that later on, by rotating this, or just place it in this fashion, therefore allowing you kind of to make an S shape with this and still rotate and make your gears spin as you'd like. To help you measure such things as stress units and speed, there are things like stressometers and speedometers that you can attach accordingly on either of the sides to these items. Now, as before, with the gearbox, you can actually craft this and turn it into a speedometer and back into a stressometer. The recipe for such is just a couple of shafts, a compass, and an andesite casing. Next, we're going to be covering shafts, belts, which is made from dried kelp, andesite casings, which I've shown you before, andesite funnels, which also is made from dried kelp and andesite alloy, as well as how you can start using these to either power your contraptions or to feed items around. Let's start by making a belt. I'm going to place this here and this here. These are shafts. You can actually extend them, and the direction of the arrow shows you the direction that you're going to be actually placing these items. It's actually very similar to the scaffold and how it's used in vanilla Minecraft. Once in place, you can therefore click on one shaft and another with a belt, and therefore if you have a straight line or an exactly diagonal line, you can therefore connect them. So if I take this and here, I place another, I can therefore also have this connect up here. If I put a hand crank on the end of this, I can therefore power my belt and therefore have it continue with pushing items to and or from certain containers. Now in this case, I have a hopper, and this is one of the ways that you can place things on here. Alternately, you can just drop them on the belt. They'll turn into item form and actually go into an inventory. You can do this with stacks as well. Just right-click with an empty hand to pick the item up. If you want, you can sneak right-click with a hopper, and you can have it place at the end or on top of a mechanical belt, and therefore feed items into that. You notice one of them immediately placed on the belt, the other one is still in the hopper. By spinning this hand crank, it's trying to go back in, but it will therefore just keep repopping back out. If I spin the opposite direction, it will go the other way until it reaches the end of the belt and probably gets popped right off the end. So in order to remedy this, we can make andesite funnels attached to nearby inventories, like a chest. Now if I were to put a chest at the other end as well, this will make it a little bit easier for things to work. It can actually feed from inventories, I have some andesite casings here, out of the one funnel and into the other, therefore just having a constant feed into these instead of going into the hopper underneath. And of course, as before, I can still reverse this. These are two directional items. They actually will export or import if there is anything in the attached inventories. So you've seen this going along one belt from one end to the other, but what about picking up and dropping off on the sides? Well, that is possible. You just need to have an inventory that is adjacent, and you can put another one of these funnels on the side of that just by right-clicking. There we go. You have to do it at the right angle or else it ends up appearing in its full-size form. And of course, if you have a wrench, you can extend this out. It's just aesthetic. There's no change in how it works. But if you notice on the top, it actually has a button in this one. On here, it has an arrow. This means it's feeding from the chest onto the belt. If I right-click with a wrench, it will actually go into the chest instead of taking from it. So if I am therefore spinning this, items will go into the chest, and you can see that it is now picking up the andesite casings that I have on the belt. If I were to reverse this by clicking on here, it then will start putting things on the belt. Let's actually have it come back the other way, and you can see that it is now taking the items from the chest and exporting them onto the belt. You can also take andesite and brass casings, click on mechanical belts, and it will actually create a structure that just kind of updates and looks pretty. If you don't like it, use a wrench to just right-click, and in either case, it does not use or destroy the casings. Pretty nice. Before we move on to all sorts of the different power generation, let's actually get into some of the progression of the mod, because you don't necessarily need to have a lot of these in order to do so. First and foremost, you're going to want to make a mechanical press. This is made with some andesite alloy, cogwheels, andesite casing, and a big old block of iron. That's right, it's a little bit expensive compared to the other stuff, but it's really worthwhile for the results that you'll be able to get access to. Now this here below it is a depot. You don't have to have one of these below it. You do just need to have one empty block space below it and some kind of solid block surface for it to stamp things on. Now in this case, a depot, just so that you are aware, is made with andesite alloy and a casing. And it can be used to place or access things by multiple machines. In this case, it's just really pretty to use with this. And I've placed a hand crank on the side of the mechanical press. You can actually power it with other means. As you can see here, it is currently being run by an encased fan, which I'll cover later. It's a very ineffective way of doing it, but at least you know that it can be powered by different machines as well as by hand. Now that I have an iron ingot in my hand, I'm going to use this as a way of demonstrating something. By placing this down, as you can see, the current speed that it is going at is just insufficient to really do too much at a very good rate, but it still works. Using gold this time, I'm going to illustrate just how speeding it up by hand can really make a difference. And this is just a good way of getting your early game materials so that you can use these sheets, whether they be gold, iron, or otherwise, to craft later materials. Now in this case, I don't actually want the depot here. I'm going to remove that and in favor put down a basin. A basin is just made with some andesite alloy. Once placed, you can then use it to smash and create 2x2 and 3x3 recipes. Now, by that I mean something like iron nuggets. If I were to take, let's say, 9 of these, take this 9 and I throw it in here, I just hit Q and toss it in, I smash it down, I then get an ingot. And it has created this. It's kind of a compacting method for any 2x2 and 3x3 recipes. In a 2x2, an example might be a crafting table. So now that I can make sheets thanks to the mechanical press, I'm able to actually progress quite a bit with how many different things I can make. Let's start with the most useful items. Potentially the wrench. The wrench is just made with some different golden sheets, cogwheel, and a stick, and you can get yourself this fantastic tool that simply by right-clicking on any of the create items, it will then instantly pop into your inventory, allowing you to not have to use durability of your tools to break them. On top of that, often by holding the item in your hand, you sometimes gain information about the units. Next is the engineer's goggles. When placed on your head, you can therefore start seeing information about the units. In the top left here, I have kinetic stats, the stress impact, and when I'm spinning this, you can see the stress units that it's generating as I'm using it. Typically, this shows up in the middle of the screen. If you want to change the position of it, currently there is a command that allows you to do so, /create overlay. Type that, and you can actually click and drag this to wherever you would like to have it visible so that it's no longer in the middle of your screen. Just hit escape to back out. Now those tools alone are very, very valuable, but I will show you one more that will allow us to access a lot more things before we get into the next level of item. And that's going to be sandpaper and rose quartz. Sandpaper is made, of course, with a bit of sand and paper. Rose quartz is made with some redstone and nether quartz. You combine the two by holding one of them in your offhand and the other in your main hand, and you just hold right-click. And then you make yourself polished rose quartz. This, combined with a redstone torch and iron nugget, will make you an electron tube. What good is this? Well, you can therefore have access to all sorts of things that then require electron tubes. For example, deployers, mechanical crafters, and mechanical arms, some of the most useful items that you could potentially make. Before I get too carried away with advanced items, let's talk about the mechanical mixer. Take this, and its recipe is just a little bit of some andesite casing, cogwheels, andesite alloys, and some iron and andesite, etc. with that whisk. You then need to have one space between it and a basin, and it will start making shapeless recipes when powered with some kind of mechanical power. In this case, I'm using manual mechanical power. But that's not all it can do. It can also make things a bit cheaper sometimes. In this case, we've got a half off sale. If you remember, andesite alloy is 2 iron nuggets and 2 andesite. In this case, we're going to be making it 1 and 1. So you just need to be up here by the basin, and you just need to throw one of each of those in. Therefore, you can see they're in the basin, and you just pull the crank, and it will start mixing. Now, it does need to have a certain speed level going on here. In some recipes, it may also have certain stress requirements. Just be aware that you'll need to double check the tooltips if something isn't mixing. Or if it mixes the incorrect item that you were expecting, you can always filter the results by taking it and placing it in here. And then regardless of whatever you put in the basin, unless the recipe ingredients for this specific item is there, it will not do any mixing of any kind unless those ingredients are there to create that item. To remove it, simply just right-click and the filter is cleared. Now you probably notice at this point that I've got a few other items laying around. A blaze burner, I've got some interesting items here, namely zinc. and copper. And with this, we'll be able to make brass. Let me get rid of this iron here. If I take copper, put it into the basin, see, just by right-clicking, nothing happens, so you will actually have to have it deposited in. You can have items fed in on the side, but just know that right now I'm just throwing things in for the reasons of demonstration. Once that's in place, I can therefore mix it, right? No, in fact, we'll need to heat it with one of these, a blaze burner. Blaze burner is made with just a little bit of iron bars and iron plates, or sheets in this case. And even if you're in peaceful, as I am currently, you can therefore just find a blaze spawner in the nether, or a blaze itself, right-click with the blaze burner, and you'll get yourself a little blaze friend. That's right, you've got your own spark now. Placing down the new blaze burner, you can see it's a little bit starved. It hasn't been fed. Feeding it some kind of burnable like coal or charcoal will make it a little bit happier, and therefore meet the heat requirements that we have for this recipe of making brass. Once you then add some mechanical speed to it, it will therefore make yourself brass. 2 ingots, in fact. So you got 1 to 1. There was 1 ingot of copper and 1 ingot of zinc. Now, as you notice, this guy actually does not stay lit forever, so it's a short time. If you have a bunch of things that you need done, make sure that you do them all together to save yourself on early game materials. This is just one way that you can progress rather quickly. Here we've got the Millstone. The Millstone is a much earlier version than trying to get into a crushing wheel, but it will be very useful for earlier on stuff. It just requires a little bit of some kind of stone, andesite alloy, cogwheel, and some wood. You place it next to a spinning cogwheel that you have powered or that you use by hand, and it will start crushing things. In this case, I'm going to take some iron, and I'm going to throw it in the top. You just actually toss it in on the top or the side. It can be fed into it, and once the particles are done, you notice the item isn't coming out anywhere. You have to right-click and take it out. Or, in this case, let me grab some wheat. I will put it up here, toss it in. It will grind that up, and while it's doing it, I will take this hopper and have it output there. A hopper or similar items can therefore pull from the millstone, and you can grab the items out from that. Now, what can you do with wheat flour? Well, you can, of course, make dough with it, which can be used to make a single piece of bread, but more importantly, dough can be used to make slime balls, and this will allow you to actually make your own slime balls so that you can make your super glue that you might need for other contraptions. Now beyond that though, we have crushed iron ore. Why did I want to bother crushing my iron instead of just smelting it? Because you can increase it a lot. By using a millstone, you have a chance of increasing your iron ore production by almost 2-fold in most cases. If you're using crushing wheels, you can increase it by up to 5 times the amount of the output. What does that mean? That means that if I have 1 iron ore, I could use a millstone and get perhaps 2 ingots out of it in the end. Now that is a kind of percentage chance, and it's not exactly 2. It kind of varies, less than and more than in iron nuggets. Same thing with the crushing wheels that we have here, except those can get a much higher percentage on their output. Now in this case, let's take a look at the encased fan. Encased fan, I mentioned earlier, having some kind of power benefits that it can be used for, though it's very minor. It's much more useful in blowing and pushing things. In this case, we're going to be using it to blow water. So, by tossing this in here, I currently have a brass funnel set up with a filter. The brass funnel filter is currently only allowing nuggets to get through into this chest by placing it here. Now I could also just click on here and tell it exactly the items that I want it to filter. For instance, I could have it filter buckets only are allowed to go into this unit if they're able to be caught on the edge of this mechanical belt. Once this gets to the top of the water, it'll eventually get pushed into this location. But this is just an example of how it's going to work. There we go, but as I've got this shut off, once I turn it on, it goes in, and the bucket is here. By putting the filter in place, it allows me to filter just nuggets. I can also increase or decrease the quantity of nuggets that go through just by using the scroll wheel. Now in this case, I'm going to throw down a piece of crushed iron ore, and it's going to be getting washed with this water. You see the blue particles happening. This will not go into this brass funnel until it is turned into nuggets. In this case, we got 12 nuggets, which is much better than what we could get from a regular iron ore smelting in a furnace. What else can we do? We can toss in wheat flour, and it will eventually get turned into dough. There we go, and I can just right-click that to pick it up. I combine it with some lime dye, and I've got myself some slime. So I hope you've enjoyed this bit by bit on Create, as I've tried to cover just about everything that I could possibly do in this catch 'em up video. I'm going to be doing some more videos with lots of little contraption ideas that you guys can always adopt, improve, and customize to your own desire. If you enjoyed, please be sure to give a like, comment, subscribe, and as always, be sure to stop by on Twitch, come visit us, click that notification bell, and help us spread the mischief. Till next time, I'll see ya. Bye.